In a world where God is dying, 4 heathens come to deliver the final nails in the coffin. From the depths of hell, Satan sends 4 puppets of the imperialist West and the Zionist Jews against God, Islam, and tiny kittens to bring you their propaganda and conspire for a new world order. This is Secular Jihadists from the Middle East.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Secular Jihadists from the Middle East, your favorite secular jihadists from the Middle East. And our goal, of course, is to form a secular caliphate where Faisal Sayyid al-Mutar, or as we like to call him, Faisal al-Baghdadi, is going to be the head of he's going to be the head secular caliph. Outshallah. Yeah, this isn't going so well. Anyway, so welcome. My name is Ali Rizvi. I am the author of a book called The Atheist Muslim, which I don't think I talk enough about. I should talk about it a lot more. And
this whole thing is covered in your book, isn't it? This whole topic.
This everything. It's already in. So I mean, if you've read my book, you don't need to see this podcast. Okay, no. I'm not. I don't mean that at all. Please.
No,
please
everybody
listen.
just go buy Ali's book, and then you don't need to watch any of our episodes again.
You actually don't need to do anything. You can just kill yourself after that. You're going to know everything you need to know about everything in the world. So that's me, and I'm with 2 other authors here. The first one is Armin Navabi, who's the author of Why There Is No God.
Hello.
Yeah, it's hi Armin, and Armin is also the founder of Atheist Republic, the largest online forum for atheists worldwide. And we also have the wonderful Yasmin Mohammed. Yasmin, welcome. I mean, I don't know why I'm saying welcome. We're all here.
Thank
right?
you, Ali. I'm pleased to be here.
Yes, that's so nice, so formal, so decent. Yeah, the welcoming thing is always weird. But in any case, Yasmin is the author of a book called From Al-Qaeda to Atheism, and she is you can check out her stuff on confessionsofananex-Muslim.com. And we're all here, and our 4th member, that word is just so, anyway, the 4th member,
White Wall. We have White Wall today.
Yeah, our 4th member hangs a little bit left of center. His name is Faisal Sayyid al-Mutar. He is the founder and head of Ideas Beyond Borders, which is a wonderful organization, which I'm pretty sure he's going to talk about at some point during this podcast.
Yeah, he's right now. He's just away because he was hungry, so he said we could get started, and he's going to join us halfway through.
And I think he ordered fish and chips today, which is really weird because usually he's really into shawarmas and falafels and kebabs. But
ew, fish and chips delivered? That's going to be soggy and gross.
Anyways, what are we talking about today? We're talking about guns because everybody's talking about guns.
Well, we're talking about something broader. We're going. So this is. We're going to be talking about guns. We're going to be talking about terrorism. We're going to be talking about
we're talking about guns. We just added terrorism and stuff because we want to make it relevant to secular jihadists, I guess.
Oh no, it's all related.
Yeah, because jihadism has nothing to do with guns.
Right.
Right?
Well, this one didn't. We're talking about this mostly because everyone talking about guns, and the LA incident, right? But this one,
or Las Vegas,
people are saying, is it a terrorist act? Is it terrorist? Or is it people are like, no, you guys everybody's racist because we're talking about mental issues and lone wolf because he's not Muslim. If he was Muslim, there wouldn't even be a debate whether this was Islamic, right?
We're not even sure if he wasn't.
Bring terrorism into it, there were actually 3 events that happened last week. Las Vegas was obviously the most deadly one, where 59 people died. Actually, I think that includes a shooter. And then there were another 500 or so in total that were injured and shot by this guy, Paddock. And then we also had an incident in Canada. Yaz, do you want to talk about that?
So this was in Edmonton, Alberta. He was a Somalian refugee that entered Canada in 2012. So he had been in the States at first, but he was denied, state said, no, we're deporting you back to Somalia for whatever reason. It wasn't a criminal reason. But they had their reasons and they said, no, we don't want you in our country. And so when they went to go find him to deport him, they couldn't find him, didn't know where he went. And the reason why is because he crossed the border into Canada, which is a very, seems to be the common thing these days. There's about 150 people crossing into Canada per day from the United States. That number is starting to slow down now because of our weather. It's getting colder. But it was, that's an average, right? There are some days where it's a lot more than that and some days where it's a lot less. And so there was a game going on in Edmonton, and they have like huge cement blocks to separate the pedestrian area from the car area. And so he couldn't get through to the pedestrians. And so he wanted to get through the cop to get to the pedestrians. And there was a cop standing there with his car and the lights were flashing and everything so that he could, it's better visibility. So it's not that it was accidental. He went directly into the police officer. And then we knew for sure it wasn't accidental because he jumped out of his car and started stabbing the officer. And the officer was able somehow, first of all, when he first hit the officer, he flew like 15 feet. And when he landed, the Somalian came and started to stab him. And the officer was able to protect his gun because the Somalian was trying to get his gun. I keep on calling him the Somalian because I can't remember his name. I try not to.
Actually, isn't that the thing to do in these days? Not to mention their name?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is something we should talk about too, because I don't necessarily agree with that.
Hashtag not all Somalians.
Hashtag.
Ayaan Hirsi Ali, my favorite human being, is Somalian. So it's no.
Kanan is another musician who's Canadian
right.
and he's Somalian. So let's spend the rest of the podcast talking
Canadian
about all
Somalis.
the good Somalian people. But go on.
Yeah. So then he started to stab the officer. The officer was able to protect his gun because he kept on trying to get his gun. But then he got away. So there was people that ran to go and help the officer. But when this guy pulled out his gun, he started stabbing. Those people were like, okay, fuck that. And then they sort of backed off. And then, so this guy ran away. But they had his car and they knew who he was. And in his car, there was an ISIS flag. So, of course, all hands on deck at that point because they have an ISIS guy on the loose. And they were checking. It was like 4 hours later, there was a U-Haul truck that came by and officers asked for the driver's license. And the guy who showed his driver's license, the name was very similar to the name of the person that owned the vehicle that smashed into the police officer. And it turns out that the passenger of that U-Haul truck was actually the driver of the guy that hit the cop. So the cops started, like they said, like 20 cop cars were after this U-Haul truck, chasing it all around downtown Edmonton. So now they've gone to the area where all the bars and restaurants are because it's really busy. And they're aiming for people in the pedestrian crosswalk. So they hit a lot of people and they hurt a lot of people. But luckily, nobody was killed, but some people were very badly injured. Eventually, they were able to flip the truck over and get the men out, and they are now in custody.
Mm-hmm. And there was a third incident in France where a man who, and this is also in the same week as Vegas and
do we have to go over the details of them? We can just
no, we're not going to go over the details. I'm just going to explain really quickly. And this man basically, the classic situation, went around shouting Allahu Akbar, and he stabbed two young women, aged 17 and 20, to death at a railway station in France. So that was another jihadist terrorist attack. And of course, we had Las Vegas, where we had this guy who fired and shot up people at a country music concert. And the question was, is it terrorism? These other two incidents where you had one incident where this guy stabbed a cop and he drove a car into pedestrians, and then they said that's a terrorist attack. In France, you had that the two women who were stabbed. That was a terrorist attack. With this guy, they're saying that that this is also a terrorist attack, and I think that whenever you've had Finsbury Park, which was a non-Muslim guy who attacked Muslims, that was deemed a terrorist attack. The Quebec mosque shooting that killed several people by a white nationalist, that was also a terrorist attack. In this case, nobody knows the motive yet, and for the definition of terrorism, of course, you need a political or an ideological motive. And so that's why the media is also holding off on labeling this a terrorist attack, because terrorism has a definition. And of course, if we have the motivation, it turns out to be a political or ideological motive, then it will absolutely fall under the category of a terrorist attack. But either way, it's a completely heinous crime. What happened in Vegas?
So Lala is pointing out that in the live chat that, people say like, oh, if this guy was a Muslim, if this guy was a Muslim, people would be saying blah, blah, blah. So other people say like, okay, look, it's not just Muslims, it's other people. So Lala is saying, but we already have so much examples of Muslims terrorists, which he's saying there are more people, like it's not always Muslim. I think that's what he's pointing. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. But what if somebody comes and says like, okay, yes, this guy was not a Muslim, but that doesn't mean Islam doesn't promote like such activities, right? And another people that are critical are of us of people looking like, was he a Muslim or wasn't he a Muslim or blah, 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 and stuff like that. And like on Fox News, it's like, we saw that the reporter was like, we can't even hate this guy. And people are like, what do you mean you can't even hate this guy? He just killed 50 people. Does he have to be a Muslim for you to be able to hate him? Right. So, yeah. So what do you guys think? Like, so some people are saying like, you guys are hypocrites because every time something like this happens, if it's Muslim, you say that, look, this is what Islam does. But when it's not a Muslim, you don't admit that it doesn't have to be Islam to do something like this. Hate is everywhere. But then go ahead.
I'm just going to point out something that happened in 2002. So I'm going to go back because I remember this. It was in Washington, D.C. There were these two snipers that just went out shooting people at random. And they were driving around in a car, these two guys. One of them was named John Allen Muhammad, and his name came out. So he was probably a Muslim. That was not called a terrorist attack. So this was a case in which a Muslim just kind of was, likely a Muslim guy went out with the name Muhammad, and he just shot up a bunch of people. Everybody called it the Washington, D.C. sniper attacks. There's actually a Wikipedia entry on it. So that was not deemed terrorism because these were just guys who were shooting for fun. I mean, they weren't doing it for any political motive. And they killed several people. I don't know the exact count of how many people they killed. Yeah, they killed 17 people. Right, but that was still just a sniper attack. So again, it comes down to ideological political motive. If you have a Muslim who goes out and he yells Allahu Akbar, which happens in most cases, what I'm citing, the DC sniper attacks was an exception. But so when you have that is obviously a terrorist attack.
So but what do you say to people that say, look, hate has no religion, evil is everywhere. So stop trying to, every time there's a terrorist attack and it happens to be a Muslim, stop trying to say like, oh, this is Islam, this is Islam. Evil exists with or without religion, with or without Islam. So how would you respond to somebody like that?
Why don't you respond to it, Armin? I know you have a good response to that.
Well, my response to that is like, we're against all bad ideas that cause evil, right? Islam is the source of evil. It's not the source of all evil, but it's the source of some evil. Something doesn't have to be the source of all evil for us to fight it, right? That's what I would respond. But
I'd also kind of bring up the historical thing. When you had Christian theocracy, they call it Christendom. That was going around, in Europe a couple of centuries ago, and they obviously chopped off loads of heads. They burned a whole bunch of witches. They killed and raped, and they did all kinds of horrible things. And, we called that the Dark Ages, and we all associate it with Christianity. We all associate it with Christian theocracy. So now that the same thing is being done in Allah's name and is being done in Islam's name, why are we so hesitant to call it? When people are out there shouting Allahu Akbar, when they're quoting the Quran, when they're quoting Surah Tawbah, when they're quoting, the Surah 8 and the verses, 12, all of the stuff in the Quran that's coming. When ISIS is coming out and claiming responsibility for these things, and people are doing it and they're pledging allegiance to ISIS, ISIS obviously puts out all these statements that are completely consistent with the Quran, from taking sex slaves to killing apostates to jihad against the infidels. I mean, all these things are actually in the Quran, or let's call it a plausible interpretation of the Quran.
Religion and guns are kind of like the same thing. Like, a lot of atheists think like, oh, if you take away religion, you're gonna have world peace. No, you're probably still gonna have some fights and war and stuff.
Of course,
it's just going to be less. It's like a weapon that is used, and it makes it much more efficient way of committing and recruiting people, right?
Even if it's the same
evil
amount.
Evil is going to be there. It's just, it has less excuse. It has less cover. Some other dogma might be used. It's just like taking a chainsaw away from a murderer. It's not.
Yeah,
it's not.
But say it's not less. Supposing it's not less. Supposing you have the same amount of violence. Would you deny the causes behind it? If someone says they do it because of the Iraq War, all these guys, Glenn Greenwald and everything, like, oh, see, it was because of the Iraq War. Immediately. They don't give the benefit of the doubt. They're like, that's what they're telling us. It was because of the Iraq War. That's why they're pissed. When it's because
let's not forget that communism. Let's not forget that communism has killed people by the tens of millions, which was not. It was a religious ideology by itself. I mean, communism, I think, is a religion.
Of course.
And it is literally the most murderous.
It's a dogmatic ideology.
It just replaced God by
semantics.
It just replaced God by the state, and eventually
you don't have to be a religion to be a bad idea. You could be a bad idea and still,
but like. Communist, but of the communist, at least leaders from Stalin to others wanted to get rid of religion. I'm not defending religion at all. But what I'm saying is that even if we did, in an ideal world, that there would be no belief in a supernatural. When we have bad ideas like communism, like Nazism might have some religious elements into it, but communism has killed. It's actually the most murderous ideology of the 20th century. Right. Almost up to 100 million. Depends. Up to 100 million people were killed.
Nobody denies the link with.
Actually, depends on what you mean by communism.
How many people you have talked to told you like it's not real communism?
Okay, so if you think about, I agree with you, because communism. When I think about communism, I think about Lenin and I think about Stalin, Mao. So yes, I agree with you, but. If people think about communism and just think about Marx only, then the guy talking about economics hasn't killed anybody. But I agree with you. But when we talk about communism, all those people are included. So yeah, I agree with you. But when we talk about religion and saying like, oh, without religion, people would still be killing, it's kind of saying like, okay, without guns, people will still could go get a truck and drive it into people. And without gun regulations, people could still go out and stab people, right? Like, yeah, but it would be less, right? If we had more gun regulations, not like, so
that's not more.
I think you guys are agreeing. You guys are actually agreeing. Here's the point.
Yeah, we're agreeing.
My parallel on this is that when it's about communism, nobody denies it. Everyone says, yeah, like Faisal just said, communism has done it. They name communism. When it's about politics and the Iraq War, they name that. When the school shooting happened in Columbine and people said it was because of Eminem and Marilyn Manson and violent video games, they named that. They had all these discussions about it. It's just when it's about Islam, nobody named it. They're like, oh, it's got to be something else.
Exactly.
And Islam is the one thing where they're actually saying Allahu Akbar. The guys who, it's not like people say, in the name of doom or in the name of Eminem, in the name of Marilyn Manson, in the name of communism. Like, nobody actually made those statements as blatantly as in the name of Islam. So that's what we're trying to say. And the thing is, these ideologies, what they do is that we're saying that this belongs in the same category as everything else, and we should be able to name it just like we do. And that's the example.
But there is a difference. There is a difference to be made between religion, which is much different than pure political ideology. I mean, there is like a religion has some spiritual elements, has prayers and fasting and connection to a supernatural, blah blah.
That's why it's more dangerous. It's
well,
more
I mean,
dangerous
that's an argument that is worth having as well. But I'm saying is that it is not fair.
But
Both
then why?
so political ideologies and
you make the
religion
same
is to
argument
compare
for
them.
communism then? So you're saying communism has killed a lot of people. So what if I came to you and brought you the same argument? Like, well, Stalin's version of communism was not the same as Marx's version of communism. So you can't blame all of communism. So that's your argument for religion.
Hashtag not all communists.
Yeah, I mean, Mariam Namazi would be triggered by that conversation.
Actually, pointing that in the live chat. Like, you should tell Mariam that her idea is worse than Islam. Go tell Mariam Namazi that.
No, well, I mean, but again, it's a difference.
Let me know when you're going to do that. I want to watch.
Difference between I mean, Mariam knows, and I know her personally, and we argued about this before. So I mean, she obviously we have to. People have ideas. Many people are communists. I assume some of them are good people, but the fact of the matter is, I think it's just because religion has different dimensions. I mean, it has a political dimension, of course. But it also has different dimensions than just pure political ideology. That communism, Nazism, fascism, capitalism, socialism, etc. There's a difference between a pure political ideology and religion. Religion is.
So would you say the same thing about communism? Because you have a very critical about communism and the fact that it killed a lot of people, which is true.
But for the religion, I mean, I would say that the political element of religion definitely killed millions of people. Yes,
I agree. I understand.
I'm not in denial. That Al Qaeda is motivated by a political version of Islam. I'm not saying that.
I'm saying you're putting religion in two different categories: a political one and a purely spiritual, not political one.
Yes,
but for I know you do that. But I'm saying would you do that for communism? Would you say
no? Because it's different.
Why is it different?
Because communism is a political ideology. It's not spiritual.
No. It was an economical ideology before.
Economical and political, but it's not. There's no spiritual element to communism.
Yeah, but it wasn't like Marx when he started writing about communism. It had nothing to do with killing people. It never mentioned anything in his book.
No, but again,
read the Communist Manifesto. It had nothing.
So religion has dimensions. Some of it is. Religion talks about economics too. I mean, the concept.
That, but if you read the Bible or the Quran, within the foundations of the text is talking about killing non-believers. But if you read the foundation documents if you read the Communist Manifesto, there's no mention of killing them.
Actually, to add to Armin's,
communism is more than Communist Manifesto. But
yeah, but Faisal, I want to add to Armin's point.
I'm saying that Faisal is making an exception to religion because he's buddies with religious moderates.
I understand what Faisal is doing, and I understand that you disagree with it.
I am buddies.
But I don't know why we're talking about it. Like at the end of the day, they both killed millions of people, and what Ali was saying back to that again, which is we can name it when it was communism, we can name it when it was whatever. But when it comes to Islam, all of a sudden we have trouble naming it. We're like, no, that's Islamism. It wasn't Islam, and we make up all these excuses.
But
that's what Faisal is disagreeing with you here.
Guys, there is a that positive element to communism as well. I mean, there were a lot of people who really like communism. I know that we're looking at it and we're calling it the ultimate evil, and I know that's how people think about it in the US, but here's the thing. There are different kinds of human rights, right? There's political rights like free speech and all the stuff that people value in the US. Then there's economic rights like free healthcare, the right to housing, the right to an education. Those are the things. It's just a matter of the different kinds of rights that each system prefers. In the US, like the Republicans, for instance, they're really into free speech and liberty and individual blah, 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 right to own guns. But they're not really into the idea of universal health care. They're not into the idea of public funded, shelter and housing for everybody. On the other hand, over there, those human rights in communism, these economic rights were considered human rights. So human rights is a concept that everybody sort of is as selective about it as people are about the verses in the Quran. They pick and choose what they want. So all of these things are human rights. They're political, they're economic. they're social. So the thing is with communism, what you're saying is that, Faisal, when you're saying that it didn't have the equivalent of that spiritual side of it, this was that. The whole idea was about economic and equality and everybody having the same right to housing, the same right to healthcare,
which never works, but that's beyond the point.
That's beyond discussion. That's a whole other thing. I mean, none of us are communists for that reason, but just ideologically, there are people who do believe in that positive side of it. And this is what Maryam Namazzi would tell you as well, too. I mean, that's what she believes in. So it is, to me, it is like a religion. One of the reasons that this is one of the political ideologies that held such a chokehold on so much of the world for so long was because of this, because it had this positive side. And whenever you have horrible ideologies, like Abrahamic religions, like communism, and whenever they have some of these positive aspects, that's what makes them really dangerous, because it gives them enduring power, right? So that's where Armin, I disagree with you, and I agree with Faisal, is that they are religions. Like, they work exactly, even if they're actually, I'm going to get a lot of crap for this, but they're humanist religions, because they're
going to respond
based
to you,
on
but
humans.
After Yas asks her question, because it's not a religion. For it to be a religion, it needs to have supernatural elements in it. But go on, Yas.
Well, Buddhism. Okay, anyway,
Buddhism is a religion because it has supernatural.
It doesn't necessarily. It doesn't rule them out, but it doesn't. But go ahead.
Yes.
Yas.
Okay, so Ali, to what you were saying, yes, it makes it more dangerous because it has the supernatural elements to it. I think that's what you were saying. I don't know.
No, because it has enduring power and it has positive elements to it.
No,
Communism
it's a dogma. Not everything that is dogma is a religion. Sorry, yes. Sorry.
No, that's fine. No, I do agree with you, Armin.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that's why it's not called a religion.
Well, I would say it's analogous to a religion.
Sure, but it's not a religion.
Okay, so that's just semantics, but go ahead with what you're saying.
It's important. I mean, it matters. Obviously we have words for a reason, right? Words have meanings. But what I wanted to ask Faisal was, so back to Armin's point about there's nowhere in the Communist Manifesto does it say kill the non-believers. Okay? So what I'm trying to say is you have no problem when communism kills people, whether it be through starvation or whatever, like even if it's not direct, you have no problem pointing to that and say these millions of people died due to communism, even though there isn't a smoking gun insofar as there is no point in communism does it say kill the non-communists. Okay, so that's one part of my question. Let me just finish my second part of my question is, when there are people that die because of Islam, you point to those dead people and you say that was Islamism. That's my question. There is a smoking gun. It does say kill the non-believers in Islam. So my question to you is, please explain to me this double standard.
Well, so it's not a double standard, but I can explain again. Is that even so with communism, obviously, at least it comes from quote unquote good intentions, but that kind of what makes it. What I agree with Ali about it makes it more dangerous is that all of these communism is an authoritarian ideology by its nature. It oppresses. There's no concept of individual rights. There's no concept of human individualism that allows people to express these things. And what matters is the collective. So eventually, those who don't sacrifice themselves to the rights of the collective eventually die. So it has indirect suffering. I mean, it sounds good on paper. That's what I always say. Communism sounds wonderful on paper. It actually does not, because it destroys all concepts of individual rights. That being said, so because communism is political ideology and economic, so economic part of it is essential. With the way I look at it, and I could be wrong. I'm not trying to say that I have the final solution, but Islam and Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, all of the religions, have more than just a political dimension and an economic dimension.
I understand that. No, we're not in disagreement on that.
So the reason
point,
why Islamism is, as I've said in the previous podcast, Islamism is an interpretation of Islam. I'm not denying that Islamism comes as a plausible interpretation as a result of it, but it's not the only interpretation. So
sure.
So yes, Islamism political.
Just the correct one.
Well, that's your opinion, but so if we separate, that's why I'm calling out Islamism, not Islam, because Islam has multiple dimensions, multiple interpretations, but Islamism is that interpretation that is causing all that evil.
So would you also in the same way be able to understand somebody like Maryam Namazi who finds the good parts of communism?
I do, yeah. I mean, because again, she understands the good parts of communism because, let's say, it looks great on paper. But I would be the first to oppose Maryam Namazi implementing her political ideals in office, because it might sound, most communists that I've met and I've been to communist meetings in Iraq, they all come up from the good intentions, the equality for all, everything is great. But that concept, in my opinion, that concept itself is evil, because it says that there's no such thing as different. We don't see as different people, different skills, different backgrounds. Everyone is equal. Equality might sound amazing. I mean, I believe in equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. So equality of outcome itself is an evil idea. So because it destroys all concepts of human individuality, skills, everything. But so. Yes, I mean, I don't think that Maryam Namazi is coming from an evil place, but the outcome of her ideological belief, if she actually believes that the thing with communism, the thing with communists, that they also are very self-contradictory at the same time. They will say that, we believe there are also versions, there are different versions of communism as well. There are some versions that are more open to individual liberty than it does to collectivism. So I mean, she might have a Sufi version. She might have a Sufi version of communism that is probably.
I love it. Sufi communism.
Is there a Sufi version of Nazism too?
I was going to say that.
Well, no, but I mean, Nazism is a very specific compared to other.
No, that's your interpretation, Faisal. There's a peaceful interpretation.
But there is a difference. You cannot just play the Hitler card.
No, you can't.
I'm not playing the Hitler card. I'm asking you a question. This is an intellectual debate right now.
Yeah. So not all ideologies are equal. Some are more specific than others, and some allow for different schools to open.
Come on, when it comes to the Quran, it's very fucking specific. The number one people that are condemned constantly. I think the Quran mentions the non-believers and what the God and Muslims are supposed to do to them more than the Mein Kampf mentions the Jews.
Well, okay.
Can I, Armin?
Right.
So I think that you're here. I'm gonna kind of go more with Faisal, slightly more with Faisal. Okay, slightly.
Good.
And the reason for that is that, again, when you talk about communism, you have all these other positive things like economic rights for all and everything, even if they don't work, but the intention's there, and that's why it convinced so many people.
Islam
right? When you talk about
intentions too.
No, I know, but I'm getting to it. So in Islam, you have all of that horrible stuff like kill the non-believers and the Jews and the Christians and everything. But you also have stuff like zakah. You also have
that makes it more dangerous because it's a sugar coating for the poison.
Yeah. I already said that. That's one of the first things I said. That that's what makes religions more dangerous than these political ideologies. The thing with Nazism is a very narrow thing, and it's about a narrow specific goal. So
Which makes it less dangerous because as soon as it becomes
Nazism is less dangerous.
Let me finish.
You know why? Let me tell you why. Because people criticize me for this. Because it tastes so much like shit that whenever it comes to power, it takes only like one generation for it to come down from power. Islam has the sugar coating, and now how many countries in the world right now do they have a Nazi government leading?
World War II happened.
It didn't last.
No.
How many countries?
Why did it last? It's because of fucking World War II. America won.
Because it's so shitty that it doesn't last. Islam has so many countries as a government theocracy right now. That's what Islam is more dangerous because it survives. Because it has
Armin, I gotta finish because I started something.
It's not bullshit. Islam is a way better,
no,
much more
Nazism
successful.
Nazism
No,
lost
no,
the
that
World
makes
War
it
II.
less
That's why we have
dangerous.
less evil committed by Nazism.
You guys are both.
If
You guys are
America
both
and
wrong.
Germany, if America and the UK lost World War II, and we're living in a post-Germany won World War II, I can tell you Nazism will have done so much damage than it just did in the years that it had.
Guys, Armin, can I finish what I
We're
was?
not defending.
Can I finish the last sentence of what I was going to say?
Ali.
When I was talking about how communism and Islam both have positive points and why Nazism is much more narrow, what I was saying was that Nazism, the analogy of Nazism is jihadism. You can compare Nazism to jihadism. You can compare Nazism to Salafism or Wahhabism or certain subsets of Islam that are more specific. But Nazism isn't an all-encompassing ideology and way of life the way that communism was, the way that Islam is, right? So that's what makes the Nazism versus Islam parallel. And we've talked about this before in previous podcasts. It makes there's certain parts of it are accurate, but it's more analogous to something like jihadism and Wahhabism, Salafism than it is to all of Islam. If you want to talk about all of Islam, then communism is a better analog for that because it's more all-encompassing. That was the point I wanted to say. And that's, I think, where the comparison, where you guys are getting it wrong.
I was getting it right. I agree with you, Ali.
Faisal, you were getting. I agree with you on this.
Nazism lost. Is okay. Now it's just fringe movements. Crazy people are picking it up here and there, right?
Because it was narrow.
Islam has not lost because it's a more powerful.
But you cannot compare Nazism to Islam. There's a huge differences.
Yeah, I agree. It's a huge difference.
You can
Islam
compare
is worse.
the fascist elements in Islam. We even did this with Majid.
Yeah, we can.
Of course, you can compare the two.
Yeah.
You can compare any two things
you
want to
can compare ISIS to Nazism.
I like people are like
you can compare Islam to Nazism, and it has happened many times. Christopher Hitchens has done it. Hamid Abdul Samad has done it, and we talked to Majid about it. Many people have done it. Why can't we do it?
That doesn't mean they're right.
There are many reasons why there are fascist elements in Islam and there are fascists obviously in Nazism, and they can be compared.
All of the Abrahamic religions, if taken by scripture, are worse than Nazism, all of them. And what's interesting is Greta Christina wrote about this. She wrote about how it's religions are much more worse, and she said that you can't compare religion with these political ideologies, but she said religions are a lot more dangerous. They're harder to fight, is I think what she was saying. I don't want to get her what she was saying wrong. But when you talk about Islam and Nazism, people suddenly go back. When you say all Abrahamic religions and Nazism, people agree, even though Islam is an Abrahamic religion. So, but I think that's why they are dangerous, is because the religions are more dangerous, and religious style ideologies like communism are more dangerous, is because of those little positive sweet spots in them.
I'll give you this one. As number of victims per year in power, Nazism is way worse, right? As number of victims per year in power, okay? But because it's not going to be in power for long, the total number of victims over history,
millennia,
over 1400 fucking years, not only just one fucking generation, count the numbers of victims of Islam, it's going to be astronomically higher.
But is it less than? But it's less than communism.
No, I agree with you. Communism is fucking shit.
No, communism have killed. I think if you're gonna play the numbers,
I disagree with you. No.
If you play the numbers game, communism killed more people than Islam.
I agree.
Good. Thank you.
I agree with you, Mao.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, more than communism, Genghis Khan.
But that's not the point, Faisal. The point is that Armin is willing to say, yes, communism killed these people. Yes, Nazism killed these people. Yes, Islam killed these people. He's being consistent across the board.
No, if he say Islamism, yes, I would agree.
You're not being consistent across the board. It doesn't mean that the three ideologies have to be identical. But when the people that have died are as a direct result of the ideologies, an honest person should be able to say, yes, it is a direct result of these ideologies.
Well, let me rephrase what you said. Nazism political ideology, communism political ideology, Islamism political ideology. They are the reasons why we have the crimes.
There's no such religion as Islamism.
Islam is a political ideology.
Well, Islamism as interpretation of Islam is a political ideology.
So Islamism, the so-called Islamism that you're talking about, it is
interpretation of Islam.
Product of Islam. So why
Yes.
can't you just say Islam?
No, because Islam has multiple interpretations. You don't want to corner. You don't want to
Why
corner
don't you
all
do
the
the
other
same-
interpretations
thank you.
and
Why
say
don't you
Islam
do the
leads to
same
this.
thing for
No, that doesn't
Nazism
make
and
any
communism?
sense.
No,
Why
it does
don't you
make
say
sense.
why don't you say communism and communismism and
No,
Nazism and Nazismism?
No,
Right? You
no,
don't say that.
because you are again political ideology. I'm the one who's consistent. Nazism, political ideology. Communism,
If-
political ideology. Islam
You
is the
read the
political
Quran.
interpretation
You read the
of
Quran.
Islam,
You
which
read
is
the
a political
Quran.
ideology. Therefore, it's
No.
the problem.
Islam is a political ideology.
So there is
and
no
you know that
non-political
as much
Islam?
as I do.
You
Okay?
don't think there is no way there is a
Even
non-political
Majid
Islam?
effing Nawaz was sitting here and he agreed with me.
Okay,
Well,
so
that-
I want to
no.
switch.
But does Majid say Islamism is all interpretation of Islam?
So
No, I
here's the
didn't
thing,
say that
Faisal,
either.
Faisal, when you ask us this question, are there any Muslims that are not political? You're committing.
Is there any
now,
version
when
of Islam that is not political? I'm not saying I didn't say Muslims. I said I was talking about ideas. Is there any version of Islam that is not political? Yes, there is.
We just finished talking about communism, for example. Somebody like Maryam Namazi follows the good parts of communism. So back to Armin's question, how come you don't call one communism and the other one communismism?
No, but that's different. That's
Because-
different.
Why?
Why?
That's different. That's different. Again, political ideology.
So
Islam.
Miriam is
Islam
not trying to make
Islam is not
communism in
only-
the government.
again,
She's
it's-
not trying to take over the
No,
world.
no.
She just wants communism in her
when
own.
we talk-
in
Okay,
her
guys,
own
we're
house.
going in circles, and we've discussed this topic before.
Islam has
sorry,
multiple
Islam.
interpretations. Islam is
So I
one
wanna
of it.
pose-
That's it. Thank you.
I want to pose a question to you guys about this whole and I forgot what. Yeah, okay, I remember the question was. So there was this thing in Orlando when Omar Mateen, right, who claimed ISIS allegiance, and then ISIS also claimed him as one of their soldiers, shot up the Pulse nightclub. It was an LGBT club, and he killed I think 49 people over there, and he did it with legally bought semi-automatic weapons, right? When he did that, just before that, I think a week or two before that, Obama had talked about, and it wasn't just Obama, this is actually a real thing, that you have a no-fly list where people are not allowed to fly. It's their names. When you sell guns, you're not allowed access to the no-fly list because of the NRA's lobbying and the whole Second Amendment thing is that, they're not allowed to. So these are people who are not allowed to fly because they're suspects for terrorism. But if they're in the US, they are able to go and buy guns without anybody being able to access the fact that they're on the no-fly list. Right. And this is part of what the NRA wants. And this is something that the current Republicans, at least, don't want to overturn. So this is like when we're talking about guns and we're talking about terrorism, it's actually very, very easy for American, Islamists to get easy access to guns, even if they're on the no-fly list. Right.
But don't you know that the good guy with a gun will stop a bad guy with a gun? I'm just kidding.
If only
Actually,
all
that's a
the
very good
people.
point, Faisal. That's your argument with religion, right?
No, it's not.
We're saying religion is bad. You're like, oh no, a good person with the religion can defeat a bad person with
I
religion.
never said that.
No, but it's kind of similar because you're saying
I
like
said
these
there are multiple
reformists-
versions of the religion, and some are better than others.
Yeah, and
But-
basically you're making the same argument that the gun advocates are saying. Like you're
But
saying, there are good people with religion can defeat the bad people with religion. Religion is not the problem; people are the problem. That's your
But
argument.
can
I
we
never said that.
stick to that other, because we're going to go around in circles again because we've
All right,
done this
good.
topic
All
before.
right, go
He
ahead.
made a really good analogy there.
I never said that. I never.
Because the gun is the same, the religion is the same. The difference is the human being.
no, religion is
is
not the same.
The human being that's
what-
using the religion and the human being that's
Guys,
using
we're
the
gonna-
gun.
We're going to go back
Anyway.
into that.
No,
I never-
that was brilliant, Armin. I thought it was
No,
great.
Thank you.
that's a good analogy, and I remember many years ago. I think someone famous tweeted it too, where people talk about how guns don't kill people, people kill people. The Republicans say that. So I remember some years ago.
Okay, great, Ali. Thank you. I thought I was being original. Now you're saying.
You're taking it away from him,
Thank
giving
you.
it to a
No.
random
It's actually-
nobody
I
on
was just
Twitter.
enjoying
I'm not the-
saying I made a good analogy. You just had to go ahead and ruin it. Thank you.
No, we had a great. I'm going to try to find the link. We had a great discussion on this several years ago on my Facebook page too. But the question is that now you have access to guns. You have terrorists having easy access to guns, and people are talking about regulation. They're saying the Second Amendment should not have any limits. There's one side that's saying that. There's another side that, the New York Times has an op-ed now saying repeal the Second Amendment. So what do you guys think? I mean, three of us are Canadian. Faisal, you live in the U.S. The Second Amendment, and does that make it easier? Because I know ISIS, when it recruits, it says, hey, in the U.S. it's great. You can just go out and buy guns, and it makes their job a lot easier. So do you think that that intersection? Oh God, I don't want to say the word intersection, but where these things cross, the access that terrorists have, people who are homegrown terrorists in the U.S. or recruited or converts, or the kind of a lot of terrorists, a lot of these Islamic terrorists have been U.S. born, U.S. citizens, including Omar Mateen, right? And
he was born outside, but
yeah, but they all had legally owned weapons that they were able to collect and they were able to amass without any kind of any significant.
So what's the question?
Impeding factor. Well, the question is that where do you guys stand on this? The whole Second Amendment thing. Both the Canadians and the Americans.
As the only American or semi-American in this discussion, I mean, the way I see it is
you're fully American.
Thank you. Is that?
Well, I don't think Trump would agree with that, but anyway.
I mean, owning a gun is a part of being an American. It's part of an American culture that makes the DNA of this country. Is the concept of individual rights, the concept that you have the right to do self-defend, and to own a gun. This should not be negotiable. But I think what should be negotiable is that the easy access to gun. I mean, I've seen like gun shows, and I think it was Texas, in which you can literally buy a strawberry and a machine gun. Not a machine gun, but you can go get a strawberry and a pistol on the same credit card. You go like, hey, I got a pistol, I got 1 pound of strawberries, and buy. This is insane. I mean, there are limits. I think. I mean, in an ideal world, I think that the way it should be like having a driving license. So if you're going to own a pistol or a handgun, you get like a salon driving license. If you want on an AR-15, which I love and adore, I like semi-automatic rifles. It should be the same way that you drive a truck. When you drive a truck, you have a different driving test than you would when you have a salon car. So I think that there should be background checks. And I think, to be honest, which I think is a lot ignored about this conversation, is that there's a lot of focus on mental health. I think the United States, even though I'm not a big believer of socialism, they should invest in a lot of mental health programs and try to make sure that, because not that I think that guns are not the problem, people kill people, but I think that it's also, I mean, guns are killing machines. They are killing machines, and that's what they are. Mm-hmm. What they are for.
Cars, by the way, cars are not killing machines. That's not their primary purpose. That's also another thing. And you need more training and more licensing and all this. The procedure for driving a car is a lot more complicated in the U.S. than having a gun. So I don't know about that parallel, and people bring it up all the time.
Having good training, knowing that how to make the gun safe, especially in a family that has children, all of these things need to be ensured before someone having a killing machine. I don't have any issue with people owning guns at all. I think guns are wonderful. I think they're good for self-defense. It's part of America. You're not going to argue why people own guns. It's part of the American DNA to be yourself and to defend yourself and to have the civil liberties you want. That's what makes us more superior than other country. It's part of being American.
Okay.
But that being said,
I'm just joking. I love you, man.
That being said, it doesn't mean we have to go fucking insane. On the other hand, in which you should get a gun whenever you want to. No background checks. I think that background checks are necessary. Mental health is necessary. Licensing to a large extent is necessary. So I think I balance out what's happening. I think unfortunately in America, the same happening with every conversation. Everything is so fucking polarized. I mean, you have insane people on the left who wants to ban guns altogether. Like, what the fuck? What it means to be an American anymore if you ban guns? What it means to the right of self-defense and the right of protecting yourself. I mean, there was a guy put a gun on my head.
But that's still a minority. The majority of the mainstream left still thinks that, yes, you should have the right to bear arms. They're not against the Constitution. They just think you should have more background. Well, even Ronald Reagan wrote about this. He said that you should have more background checks. You should have a waiting period.
But let me give you one example.
An abortion, they have a waiting period. So buying a gun, you don't have a waiting period. It's like it's...
I mean, I know that sounds anecdotal circumstance, but I mean, there was a time in which a gun was pointed on my face to steal my cell phone. That was in Houston, and you know how long? I mean, I was so crazy, and I just pushed the gun with my hand like this.
Are you fucking serious?
And then, I pushed the gun, and then I was pushed away. So I put the gun on my face. Yeah, so I was like, my cell phone comes first before I die. So I pushed the gun away, and then he pushed me away, and then the neighbors come in. So anyway, do you know how long the neighbors?
He's messing with an Iraqi. That's why.
Yeah.
Okay, Faisal, what would have happened if you had pulled out your gun? What do you think when he saw you reaching for your gun?
Yeah, that would be the most dangerous situation.
You wouldn't be here.
No,
I mean,
but think about it this way.
You would be dead by now because he wouldn't. He wasn't shooting.
I have a different situation, and I was also had a gun on my face. I mean, I'm not used to that. But my friend had a gun. My friend had a gun, and when he pointed the gun at them, all these guys run away. So when you talk about guns, it's not just only the person. Like when you get attacked, I mean, if you are very well trained, you are able to pull the gun quickly. But generally speaking, people freak out and they not necessarily act the most rational way. But if your friend has a gun, you might also actually have a chance of.
Okay, so let's go to yes, because your answer was 20 minutes, but yes opinion.
Well, that's why we're really short because I totally agree with Faisal. When I hear people talking about, repeal and I just read something today about somebody talking about, we need to get rid of the whole Second Amendment because when it was written, it wasn't, they were talking about muskets. They weren't talking about the kind of guns we have today and blah, blah, blah. No, I don't. I definitely think that's going way too far. I agree with Faisal that, all of these regulations that you were talking about, Ali, like people being on a no-fly list, but still being able to buy guns, that's ridiculous. All of these regulations need to be put into place. That's my opinion.
Lala is pointing out that guns are not the problem. Gunism is the problem.
Come on, Lala. Lala has obsession. Lala has obsession with figuring out solutions to human problems. So.
Okay, so I just want to say, how many of all four of us, I do think that you should have the right to own a gun. So when we were in Pakistan, we absolutely had to. We had guns in the house, right? And we just had to. It's for self-defense. If I was moving to Chicago, I would like to have a gun. Even Bill Maher, who's this hardcore liberal, he owns guns. A lot of liberal people own guns. So how many people? So let's just talk about just basics. Should you have the right to own a gun according to the Second Amendment? Who says yes?
Yes,
of course. Yeah.
Well, who made the Second Amendment like gospel? Anyways, like
it is gospel. It's there to protect the First Amendment.
No, I'm not saying it's wrong or right or wrong, but let's not just assume just because something was written down and okay. Here's the thing.
For me, it doesn't even apply. I'm Canadian.
United States Constitution, one of the best documents. No,
that's a different question. But the question is that do you think that we should have the right to at least own a gun? Because you can do that even in Canada.
By the way, I want to defend. I don't want people to think I don't like the United States Constitution is one of the best constitutions out there, right? But that doesn't make it always 100% true, right? So
but that's a different conversation about whether the Constitution is applicable today or not.
Right.
Do you believe the right to bear arms? Yes or no? Question.
Yes.
Of course. I think in Canada we have the right to bear arms.
Yeah.
You have that here too. You just have to get training for it. You just have to make sure that when you're going to use something that's that dangerous, you're going to have to know. But the thing is, now the next question is that
I guess my answer would be depends on the country.
Depends on the country.
So my question for you, Ali, as someone who's pushing for gun control, do you believe Trump? So would you trust Trump if Trump tomorrow is going to push for gun regulation? Would you support and trust Trump in enacting a gun regulation in the United States?
Again, that's a very broad question. First of all, it depends on...
No, it's not a broad question. It's a question, actually.
No. That's what I'm saying. It depends on what kind of control he's putting in, right? It depends on what he wants to do. So
let's say the government needs to approve you. You have to get approval from the government, the U.S. government. You're going to have a waiting period. You're going to be approved by the Department of Homeland Security. You're going to have an AR-15. The Department of Homeland Security, Trump put that person in charge. He's going to want approving your guns. Would you support that measure?
I would maybe not. That would might be a little bit too much. But if you have background criminal checks that don't necessarily need to go to the government, but okay, they operate under the Homeland Security Department. If you have waiting,
which is appointed by Trump,
and if you have, if Trump does it, then okay. So here's the thing: I've supported Trump on 3 different things so far. First of all, I wrote a whole article about what he got right in his speech in Saudi Arabia. I supported him on the Syria strike. And there's one other thing I supported him on. But those are 3 things. And I've always openly said it, and I've always gotten a lot of shit for it. So yes, if he goes out and he actually does this, I think that I would support it. Because for me, it's about the idea. It's about what he does. It's not about him as a person, even though that's a whole different conversation. But here's the thing with the Second Amendment is the Second Amendment isn't about the right to own a gun. It's about the right to bear arms. And there's many different kinds of arms. Right, you have your muskets and all that stuff at that time. Then you have semi-automatic weapons. You have fully automatic weapons. You have grenades. You have nuclear arms. They're also arms. These are all arms. So the thing is, if you think that the Second Amendment just says arms and shouldn't have limits, so we should allow semi-automatics and automatics and these bumper stock things.
I don't think anybody is saying that.
Yeah, then no, a lot of people do say it. Then why does
Who support that the civilians should have the right to own
tanks? Well, that's what I'm saying. Nobody does.
We all are on the same side, I think, with this. I think we all agree that there should be just because you have the right to bear arms doesn't mean that you can own a fucking atomic bomb, right? There should be a limit or something, right?
So the thing is, a lot of people, but then does that? What about semi-automatics and what about fully
so
automatic?
we agree that there should be a line somewhere where the line should be, right?
Yeah. Should you be using an AR-15 and AK-47 for duck hunting to hunt ducks? That's not fair to the ducks.
Well, I mean, generally people don't use that for hunting ducks, but
the main point of this whole bear arms thing is not hunting, right? These are people that mostly think that the U.S. government could turn into a tyrannic government at some point, and the people should be able to defend
now.
themselves.
Okay, so now you're getting into the nuclear thing because the U.S. government has a shitload of nuclear weapons. If it becomes tyrannical,
I will defend the people that are thinking that the government might turn tyrannic. You see, but your guns.
I agree with you that it might turn tyrannical.
Actually, I don't know how likely that is. But anyways, but you say, but the U.S. government has atomic bombs, right? Yeah, but look how hard it was for the United States with all its military to defeat ISIS with which was a small group of people with guns. Just because you have a military, it's easier to cause
We're talking
chaos.
about a tyrannical government.
I know, but I'm just saying it's easier to
They didn't nuke ISIS because they didn't want to.
I'm just saying, no matter how powerful the U.S. Army is, it's easier for a bunch of people with guns to cause chaos than a government with a big army to maintain order, right? It's not impossible, but if everybody is armed, it's not that easy for a tyrannical government. And I don't know why I'm trying to defend the right wings on here, but I'm trying to become because we are all agreeing. I'm trying to be devil's advocate.
You're doing devil's advocate, but here's why you're completely wrong. The reason if the U.S. wants to go and destroy ISIS and destroy all of it by dropping 5 nuclear bombs over there, just 5 bombs. Hydrogen bombs. That's all it would take. ISIS, you would never hear from ISIS again for the rest of it. Of course, millions of other people would die, but you'd never hear from them. The reason the U.S. doesn't do it is not because, they don't have the means. It's not because they don't have the capacity. It's because they don't have the will. They don't want to do that. They want to make sure they don't kill a whole bunch of civilians. But if you're talking about a tyrannical government that doesn't give a shit.
You can't kill an idea with a bomb. Actually, if you bomb ISIS like that, you're actually going to make it grow.
Tyrannical doesn't mean
not when the whole
tyrannical
place
doesn't mean
decimated.
there are different levels of tyrannical. I mean, there is a tyrannical who might be, let's say that there is a revolution against the president in the South, let's say, and some of the people in the South, some of them might be sympathizers, some of them might be Democrats, let's say, and let's say that the tyrannical president is a Democrat. We're just saying that for the sake of argument. So let's say he's a Democrat, and it would not be wise for him to nuke. I mean, tyrannical has a different levels of tyrannical. There's tyrannical who would be willing to kill people, shoot them in the face. There are people who would be willing to nuke them. There are those who want to dissent on political opposition, Putin would not use nuclear weapons against his oppositions. He will assassinate them. He would might send intelligence to shoot the people, but he would not nuke. Let's say Pittsburgh, if revolted, St. Pittsburgh, if it revolted against Putin, he will not use a nuke against them, and that's Vladimir Putin. So
Faisal is making my point. Like,
not all tyrannical is equal. Yeah, so Sisi is tyrannical.
Well, Pittsburgh that's a tough one.
So the U.S. could become semi-tyrannical and still not have the will to bomb its own people,
or
and
the
at
means.
that point, and at that point, people having guns will stop the government from becoming too tyrannical. That's the argument.
So the reason this whole conversation sounds really ridiculous at this point is because it kind of is. I mean, this is just not
but we
the
have
time
to
now.
Okay.
When I mean, it's just not the time anymore where you can have like a whole bunch. So here's the thing.
Who thought Trump will win?
Who
thought Trump will win?
None of us here. Right?
If you think that America doesn't have a chance of becoming tyrannical, well, if we have a Trump now under the situations that are much better, maybe in 50, 60 years, you never know, right?
Yeah, but Trump...
or actually, Faisal, to Faisal's point, the Jews in Germany never thought, like before Hitler took power, they never thought that something like that could ever happen, right?
They're not going to take a train to France, not to go to a gas chamber.
Right. Yeah, you're right about that. I think that's a good argument. The counter to that, which is not just devil's advocate, I think it has some merit, is that the system overall works as well. I mean, Trump, even though he has won, he's basically, apart from appointing Gorsuch as the Supreme Court justice, he really hasn't gotten any of his legislative proposals through. He's been signing executive orders, which is actually kind of big government. That's something that Republicans are not supposed to believe in. But apart from that, he hasn't been able to get a whole bunch of things done, even with the Republican majority in the House and the governorships and the Senate. And the reason for that is because the system.
Okay, Marcus is saying, but people need to own guns. What if people need to own guns not because of a tyrannical government, but because people need to be able to defend themselves?
Of course.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. If I was in Pakistan, when I was in Chicago, all of these people own guns because you want to be able to protect yourself.
But didn't you agree that having a gun makes a situation like if somebody points a gun at me and I'm like, okay, fine, here's my wallet, here's my phone, go get lost. That's a safer situation than if
but that is one situation but that's one example you mentioned. Let's say you live in the middle of nowhere.
People owning guns in the street, doesn't that make the whole situation? Now I'm jumping from right to left right now.
But that is one example. Let's say you live in middle America. Let's say you live in a small house, and let's say in a driveway between Kansas City and St. Louis, right? You are in the middle of Missouri, very small town, and you have cameras all around the house. You see a thief coming to your house, and you have a gun. Do you think if you're going to fire some bullets, the thief will go away? Or do you think the thief would actually even go to the house if they know that these guys have guns? Mm-hmm. There are multiple situations of self-defense. Self-defense is not all the situations that when somebody approaches you, let's say you're walking in Fifth Avenue and somebody comes and wants to steal your wallet. There is a position when you're in the house with your family, blah blah blah. There's so many places in which self-defense will be applicable.
I'll give you a real life example of this. So when we were in Lahore in Pakistan, we lived right next to our aunt. Our aunt's house was raided by the Taliban because we're a Shia family. So the Taliban came in, they kicked my cousin in the head. We were right next door. We're kind of watching the whole thing. They kicked him in the head. They had his 5-year-old daughter at gunpoint. He had a bit of a gun collection in his house, so they actually took all of his guns. And they just horribly beat up everybody, shot up the house. They didn't kill anybody, but then they left, and they had a little sort of a pickup truck with a thing on it, a little the shade thing on it. And as they were driving away, my cousin had one gun that he kept under his pillow, and he ran outside and he shot at the back of it. He didn't do it when they had the gun to his daughter's head, because obviously that would be a situation that would be a problem. That would be a huge risk. But he went out and he shot one of the guys in the legs as they were leaving, as they were driving away. And then they went and did a check at all the hospitals, and they were able to catch the guys. Right. So that's an example of where.
By the way, Ryan wanted me to point out that in Canada, you don't have the right to bear arms. You have a privilege. It's not a right here in Canada. It's a privilege. Like it's not like a. I don't know what's the. I could go back.
That's it. Okay, so yeah, you're right about that. It is a. privilege, I mean, the point is that if you want to go get a gun license, you can go get a gun license. I mean, even having a car here is a privilege, right? Like a lot of people are not going to get their licenses, so you have to get a license to be able to have a gun. So
I think
right, yeah.
I think Canada is too extreme. Maybe the reality is something in between.
Right, and the per
That's why
capita
people are
crime
running
rate
away from
We
obviously
have a
bears
lot
that
of
out.
gun owners here in Canada.
Yeah, we do.
But they mostly use it for hunting, not for killing each other.
Yeah, you guys
Yeah.
have a cultural problem. You guys need to
It's
go
not
see.
a problem. It's what made America great.
Well,
Go ahead.
okay,
You guys need to go see a professional with your you have issues.
No,
Next
I mean,
question.
it is a culture. It is the way I see it. I mean, I wasn't born here, so I wasn't raised in that culture. But at the same time, the way I see it, the way I like this country, I mean, they all kind of come hand in hand. The right for the individual is very valued here. The individual rights, the concept of you being yourself and defending yourself and living your life to the maximum. It may be sound like a utopia.
having an abortion, getting universal health care, those individual rights. What about those rights?
Well, that's a good discussion to have. Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
I feel like Americans are fighters and they always want to be fighting. And that has to, I think this goes back to the guns. You have the guns, you're like, I want to be protecting myself because there's evil and I got to make sure that my family is safe. And you're always sort of like ready.
Well, that's the reason there's Canada and there's the United States, right? Because Canadians stayed with the British and America did not.
That's not a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. That's how America has progressed to the point where it is today, is because they're always fighting for their freedoms, fighting for what they want, fighting to make things better. But I think that, right, what I see happening today is they've reached a point where there's no enemy. I mean, there is an enemy, but they're clueless about the enemy. But they started to actually fight themselves. They started to fight each other because now with all of this, right, left stuff and black, white stuff, and I feel like Americans are very like us versus them, and they need it's like a football team, right? Like they need to have adversaries. They need to have somebody, some rival. They need to be fighting against somebody. And yes, you're right. Canadians don't have that. We don't have that culture of fighting in us.
I love what you just said. I think that nails it. Nobody's nailed it that well since the crucifixion.
On winning, Faisal, let me remind you, it was Canadians that the only people that managed to invade the United States all the way to the White House, and we burned that shit down. Okay, Canadians burned the White House down.
Let's not provoke them, because right now, if they got us, we'd be destroyed.
No,
so
I mean, I think I agree with you. I mean, there is a cultural element in the United States that, I mean, I think all of us agree here, and I hope all of us agree here, that people with mental issues should not have access to killing machines. Do we agree on that? I mean, I think that
but Trump has access to the nuclear button. What about that?
Well, that's a different issue. But I think is that
that's exactly what you said.
But there is a cult. I mean, all countries have different cultures, and some are more closer to other. I mean, there is a culture. There is a very strong culture of individualism here. I mean, America is itself started as a result of the revolution against the British, kicked out the British, the Tea Party, not the crazy Tea Party we have today, but the Tea Party that's established in Boston, is that there is this culture is like my life, I lead it the way I want to.
Can I?
And that has advantages and disadvantages. It's not. I mean, I do think, for example, like an American convert to Islam is generally coming from a very bad place, because it is about like, oh, I want to be special, I want to look different. There's all this like, I want to be. Some people are just too assholes that you don't want them to be themselves. Like the last thing you want to tell an asshole is be yourself. Like, don't be yourself. Actually, don't be yourself, because if you're gonna be yourself, it's actually a bad problem.
Can I confront that point, because you're saying the United States is a bad? I'm gonna give you two examples of why that might not hold water. So you're saying it's about liberty, it's about being yourself, it's about being able to do what you want. But in the United States, it's easier to get a gun than to get an abortion, right? There's more regulations whether you can get an abortion or not than your gun. And also,
But how is that related? I mean,
but let me
libertarians support both.
In the United States, gay marriage became legal 10 years after it was legal in Canada, right? So when it comes to individual liberties and freedom, America is, compared to Canada, you could selectively look at guns and be like, oh yeah, we are enjoying freedom and individualism and be who you are more. But when you look at gay rights, for example, United States is behind most modern countries in the world.
Have you heard people called hypocrites before? Like, obviously, the Christian right, the issues that you're talking about, so the Christian right are very strong on guns. They believe in liberty when it comes to guns, but they don't believe in liberty when it comes. I agree. I mean, they're called hypocrites. But that actually changes across the planet. For example, like, let's say conservatives in the UK who are closer to libertarians in America in terms of social issues. David Cameron said, I support gay marriage not in spite I'm a conservative, but because I'm a conservative. Because a true conservative, I don't want to go to this conversation about what a true conservative is, but a true conservative would be for gay marriage and for gun rights at the same time. Not necessarily the crazy gun rights that Alex Jones is advocating for, but
we're
like
the
libertarians. Yeah. So
I think you're talking about libertarians.
These guys are closer. I mean, a libertarian would challenge you on guns and would challenge you and would actually agree with you on gay marriage and abortion.
The Republican Party in the United States is nothing like libertarian.
Yeah, but you are saying, but what you're saying is that America is good on guns and bad on abortion. Is that what happens? Is that, I mean, that's a long conversation altogether. Is that the Christian right movement rose up, the Southern strategy of Nixon and Reagan empowered the mix of the
but I mean,
Christian
it's
right
true.
and the Republican
that's a
Party.
Problem there, right? I mean, it's an inconsistency. So you admit that's hypocrisy.
And then you have the left, for example, who are pro-gay rights and pro stuff, but they also they're authoritarian in other things, right? So both sides are authoritarian. Some are better than others. I mean, so some of them want to control your money, and some want to control your bed. But I mean, the guys who are talking about raising taxes to 50% income tax, well, that is kind of. I mean, I want to sound hyperbolic, but it is crazy. It's crazy. Like when I was in Denmark last month, and people who earn less than like 70,000 pounds pay 50% income tax. Do you know how insane that is? That half your salary is paid to in Denmark, in Scandinavia. And actually, that's you know what? Do you know that on their cars they have 200% tax rate on cars in Denmark?
Okay.
Like how is that not authoritarian? How is that no?
But how come they have one of the highest standards of living and happiness in the world?
Well, yeah, they do.
Well,
because they what they do is a lot of things that Americans pay for privately, for instance, healthcare, education.
So wait.
But they're also homogeneous cultures.
Socialism wins? I don't.
No.
Because they have a better standard of living and happiness than they have in the United States.
But that is there are also other elements. The homogeneous aspect. The people that many of them are living to people who look similar to them. There are so many reasons. There are so many books on the subject. But what I'm saying is that, like, I mean, there's hypocrisy on a lot of these issues coming from people who support abortion, pro-choice, but then will tell you hijab is a sign of feminism. These sentences now go together in mainstream left-wing conventions in which a symbol of modesty culture, which is hijab, and I think Yasmin and Ali both agree with that, are said by people who say, we support same-sex marriage, we support abortion, but we support the hijab as a feminist statement. And then you have the right wing will say, they support guns and we support free speech, but we want to control people who do them in the bedroom. There's so much.
We also just recently got Death with Dignity, which is something you are far behind on in the United States.
Yes, I mean, there's so many things that America lacks, and unfortunately, I mean, I think, but at the end of the day,
most important thing that you guys have that we don't have is the free speech. Right? Is the free speech in your constitution, right? We have free speech in Canada, but because it's not in writing in the constitution, and we have hate speech laws, that's something that is always
The U.S. is better at that.
The U.S.
got
is
that right.
definitely better at that.
And can I
Well,
just
that's
say one
the
thing?
reason-
Can I say
That's
one
the reason
thing?
I
wrote
chose
about
the
that
United
in my
States.
book.
That's the reason I chose the
wanna
United
say.
States,
But we
even though I get accepted. I get accepted to be in different countries, and I chose the United States mainly for freedom of speech. And speaking of which, it's been 8 years since I left Iraq. It's been
Oh, yeah.
it's been almost.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Well,
Is
I don't know.
Today,
I don't know about that.
8
But
years today?
yeah, well, huh?
8
Not
years?
today.
Yeah.
No, actually, I just realized that I left Iraq in September 9th, 2009. I left it from Baghdad International Airport, and I've been once back for almost like 4 or 5 days. I said hi to my parents, and that was 2012, and so I've been in America almost 4 years and a half. So in a way that now I have spent actually more of my time outside of Iraq inside America than other countries, because I lived in Lebanon
Wow.
and Southeast Asia before I came to the United States. But yeah, what I was saying is that I when I was applying for my refugee status, and after I did the interviews, and then they told me like, oh, there's these countries that accepted
Which
you.
countries?
I think it was like Australia, Sweden, Denmark, no, Australia, Sweden, Canada, and New Zealand, I think, and the United States. And then I said, oh, of course the United States, because I want to live free, and I want to have my right for freedom of speech. Actually, it was freedom of speech that was my main, because I was like, economically speaking, if I wanted to make more money, I would actually live in Singapore. Singapore, I can make much more money in Singapore than I would ever make in the United States. Income tax is about 4 or 5% for if you make $200,000. Like it's the best place for business.
But you
But
can't
I
say a
said-
word about Islam there, so.
Yeah, but I said freedom of speech. This is what I have sacrificed my life for, fighting against Al Qaeda, the right for freedom of
But
religion
now
and the
you
freedom
work
of
with
speech.
a Singaporean partner, so
Yeah, and I work with a Singaporean partner. It's really interesting. So she comes from that interesting country in which you have the
What would have been your second choice?
Good question. I probably would be Australia.
Your first choice was the UK, right?
No. My first choice was the UK before I applied for refugee status. I was going supposedly to go to the UK as a visitor and study there, and then it didn't work out because they wanted £60,000 in my savings account. But I would have chosen Australia, Armin, for the weather, and also because it's like very small population with a very big land,
That sounds
which
like
I find
Canada.
So I found that very interesting. And it was also very closer to me because I was living in Southeast Asia. So it would be like a flight of 4 or 5 hours to Australia. Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't want to live in Europe. I wanted, so Canada probably would be a third choice. I mean, I've, because many of my, relatives, my sister, many of my friends went to Europe. They always talk about no matter how secular we are, no matter how non-religious we are, we're always treated as non-real British, non-real German. You can never be German. You can never be French. No matter how open-minded, liberal. So they always tell me like, Faisal, even though we enjoy, we're very happy that we escaped Iraq and we live in France, Germany, whatever. We are always hated. We're always treated that we're something else. So I've always wanted countries from the what's called the New World, which is Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the United States. I've chosen the United States because I think it's the best of all of them. That's my opinion. And I'm very happily going to be a citizen in maybe 6 to 7 months, and I will be able to vote in the next elections. First of all, vote in my local elections in New York, and maybe vote for like
Trump
elections. Yeah. Well, 2000. So hopefully, I'm going to vote in 2020 against Trump. Or maybe for Trump. If he's running against Adolf Hitler, maybe I will choose Trump. But I'll see 2020 what the prospect candidates are. I hope the Democrats will have somebody that is who's not going to say that Linda Sarsour is my VP. I hope this.
I hope the Republicans challenge Trump with the candidate as well.
Very unlikely.
Yeah,
I think.
it could come from anywhere.
I think it's like they saw him won this election. I think they're probably going to go with him. Generally speaking, they don't change the candidates when he runs
unless
again.
they think he could lose. It did happen with in 1980. So
do you think Hillary's going to have the energy to try for a third time?
She's done. She
says she will never do it.
She should go back.
She should go back to her country.
Go back to the forest.
Go back in the hole.
She's done, and it's done for. I like Hillary Clinton a lot, so obviously I'm probably the only one here who does, but I like her a lot, and I am saying that it's over for her. I'm telling you.
All right,
so
you're going to ask a question, yeah. Go on.
Yeah, so I want to ask one last question since we're finishing up here, and so this is something that's interesting. In the last 3 or 4 days, ISIS has said several times that this guy who killed everybody in Vegas, Paddock, that he was one of their soldiers.
They're desperate.
And they said it once, they said it again, they've said it a third time today, and then now they have a weekly newsletter called Naba that came out where they have a whole page on it and they doubled down on it. A lot of people are reporting this. Most people aren't, because there is zero evidence. They haven't produced any video of the guy saying anything. They haven't produced any statements, nothing. But at the same time, there's many other, they don't go around, they don't have, everybody says they have this record of claiming everything, but they actually don't. Most of the times when they have claimed things, it has been accurate. It's been found to be accurate. So, but this time there's no evidence.
I think.
Yeah, they could be desperate. So actually there's a New York Times reporter who's an expert on ISIS, right? And there's 2 people, I think, in the Western writers who are excellent when it comes to ISIS reporting. One is Rukmini Callimachi from the New York Times, and the other is Graham Wood from the Atlantic.
I would add Michael Weiss to it.
Michael Weiss is another one.
Yeah, the author of ISIS and Army After.
So Rukmini Callimachi has a thread where she actually posted screenshots of it. She says that ISIS claims that he converted to Islam 6 months ago, and he has been very reclusive since then. When they talked to his brother also said that I haven't really spoken to him for 6 months. So there's a whole bunch of things. It's a great thread. I think everybody should go in and read it.
So
just in case.
What does it conclude? Tell us. Tell us the conclusion. Why?
I'll go through it. So she's saying that Naba, the weekly newsletter, is out. Under a picture of the Mandalay Bay drenched in blood, they rehashed the attack.
I know, but what did she say is the reasoning? Why is ISIS claiming credit? Because
she doesn't know why. She just says it's very unusual for them to claim credit for something.
I think I'm correct. Tell me if you think I'm right. It's because
by the way, I just want to say I don't think ISIS did it, and I don't.
Obviously, ISIS did not do it. But what we're asking is why are they claiming credit, even though historically they haven't claimed credit for things that.
Well, what evidence?
The reason. No, there's no
what
evidence.
Do you have to say? Obviously, ISIS did not do it. What evidence do you have to make this statement? I'm not trying to say that ISIS did it.
Anything is possible. Anything is possible, right? But this guy seemed to have given that there seems to be no link to Islamic, anything Islamic or anything terrorism related. It seems like it's just a terrorist act that was self-initiated. It could be, but given that there's no evidence, the number of possibilities are so much that makes the percentage chance of that very low. Okay, so that's my.
Yeah. But the thing is, his profile. I'll tell you what doesn't fit.
It's kind of like Bernard Russell teapot kind of situation. But what I'm saying is that if this is not a terror, he's a terrorist. But if he's not a ISIS,
he's not.
Whatever terminology we want to use for terrorism,
he's a mass murderer, not a terrorist. Terrorism has a specific definition.
Okay, so whatever he is, okay, if he's not an ISIS member. You're saying what has changed for ISIS to do it? Well, obviously what is changing for ISIS is that they're being defeated and they want their brand to not die with their army, right? And they're desperate for their branding to continue. So I guess they maybe initially when they claimed credit for it, they saw it and like, this must be one of our ideological supporters. So they kind of racially profiled themselves, right? So they're like, oh, terrorism, it must be us. So, but then they couldn't take it back, right? Because they didn't want to admit that they made a mistake. They were desperate to take credit. And once they went with it, they doubled down on it. Like, if people believe Alex Jones and he makes conspiracies, ISIS would like, I'm just going to tell people that the government is lying to you. Yes, this was one of our soldiers. And people are just going to, ISIS followers were probably
interestingly, ISIS did not claim the Edmonton killing, even though the guy had an ISIS flag. They haven't claimed a lot of these.
But this is high profile. It's about branding. They want to claim credit for something that is
something really, really big. They're saying that he converted 6 months ago. So what's what would be interesting is if it did turn out to be that, then that would completely change all of the whole profiling.
Right.
It's like, okay, you guys told us who you wanted to profile. You gave us a list of 6 countries that you don't want us, that you're not going to allow in. So you're telling us who not to profile, right? Who you're not going to profile. So we're going to start recruiting from those other places. That could totally change the conversation. But
if it's not ISIS, then ISIS profiled the guy.
yeah, ISIS profiled the guy. That's fucking fascinating.
I do find it sad that like the conversation, these conversations, and I always hate it. Like I hate it so much when someone asks me for an interview after there's a terrorist attack.
Yes,
like
good point.
Why do people talk about these conversations about profiling and terrorism and guns only when there is a terrorist attack?
Yes.
That's actually the worst time to have a conversation because everyone is so emotional. Everyone is not going to use facts.
Actually, I do agree that they should have the conversation when the attack happens. But what I would say is they should have the conversation also when the attack is not happening.
Exactly. Right. So at least people are like more chill and they're able to like. But that being said, I mean, I think that it is possible that this guy. I mean, there's something very weird about him. Okay, so he transferred $100,000 to the Philippines. Okay,
which is nothing for him.
Which is nothing. He comes from a very wealthy. He's an accountant,
pocket change for him,
professional gambler, multimillionaire.
And the thing is, like, what would bring? I mean, again, probably it's mental illness is one solution, but what would bring a guy?
No evidence of that either.
Yeah,
There's no evidence of that.
What would bring a guy who comes from a very wealthy family to do this if it was not ideological? I mean, so it's either ideological or mental illness, right? Because mental illness might bring a guy who's so rich to actually, because you have the very good fucking life. Or why would you even want to go mass murder or even like feel a grudge against anyone?
Because you're thinking about it from a point of view of a person that has sympathy for your fellow human beings, right? If you're a psychopath and you feel like, you know what, I'm just bored with my life, I want to go, and I want to leave a mark before I go. Right?
So it's mental illness. Okay, so there are two things. It's either mental illness or ideological. And if it's mental illness, I mean, as far as Ali says, I think New York Times also reported it, that there has not been any history with him being mentally ill.
Yeah, but many people are psychopaths and they are never diagnosed as psychopaths.
Speak for yourself, Armin. But
no. Here's a problem. So no. The psychopath. Speak for yourself. That's funny, Faisal. But here's the thing. The problem here is that he doesn't fit any narrative. If you have the psychopath narrative, he doesn't fit that either. He's 64 years old. He's an older man. He's a senior citizen almost. He had a girlfriend who was, in the Philippines. So, Armin has something in common with him. They have Filipino partners. Yeah. So what he did was that before
they was that Filipino.
Before the attack, so before the attack happened, he actually sent her over to the Philippines. He flew her out there, and then he sent her $100,000 for her to buy a house and everything. She got upset because she thought he was breaking up with her because he's also been previously divorced. And he amassed about 50, 60 weapons in 2 different properties. He had them all over there. He was very organized. He had planned this thing since the concert was announced, which was in February. So it does not fit the psychology of somebody who's even a psychopath or
but people are unique. It's just because somebody doesn't fit the profile. But these profiles are always about 80%, 90%.
I agree with you.
Hashtag not all psychopaths. Hashtag not all psychopaths.
Not all. We don't want to demean all psychopaths. But what I'm saying is you're right, Armin, but that's the thing. Right now, it's really, really hard to figure out what the motive is. The jihad thing, it doesn't completely fit either because he killed himself rather than ISIS. Right. The whole thing is they wait until they're shot. Right. So they have, there's so many, there's a lot of things that don't really fit, but it was definitely very, very well planned. He knew exactly what he was doing. He planned for his girlfriend. He did everything.
What if, let's say he's not ISIS? What if he's a part of some crazy group that hates country music? That's maybe there is
that would be me.
Yeah, maybe there's a militia. Maybe there's a militia out there that says we should kill everyone who listens to country music. I mean, I don't know.
Think about this. Hey, I'm getting old. This might be completely off. Think about this. Say somebody that doesn't have any sympathy for your fellow human beings. So I'm getting old. I have lots of money. I enjoyed my life. I'm getting bored. I'm going to die one day. Why not make history before I die?
Right. You know what? That's
probably.
the thing
That's a
that came to my mind
possibility.
too.
That's a possibility. But that being said, I mean, let's just take the narrative, which I don't necessarily believe in. But let's say I am old, I am tired, I'm rich, and there is some trendy group that is capturing the news all the time called ISIS. Why don't I just join them and kill people by the hundreds, and then that's it? I am part of this trendy terrorist group.
No, I don't. That sounds really.
By the way, Faisal, why
too
is
much
he
of a
not a
stretch.
terrorist? People are pointing this out in live chat. Why would you? What's the definition of why is this guy not a terrorist?
Because he's not doing it for political.
I mean, the FBI definition of terrorism is killing people, intentionally killing civilians for political objective.
To advance a political or ideological motive.
Yeah, so there
That's
was no. If it's ISIS, he's a terrorist. If he's white nationalism, he's a terrorist. As long as, but terrorizing people doesn't mean you're a terrorist. Terrorism itself has its very specific.
All right, so it's not brown-white thing. If it was white supremacist, it would be still a terrorist.
There's a
Of
lot
course,
of white
yeah.
Dylan Roof was called a terrorist, right?
Exactly, he was.
Guy. There was this guy, the guy who did the Quebec mosque shooting. He was called a terrorist openly. The guy who did Finsbury Park was called a terrorist.
Andres Breivik was a terrorist. The one who
all these
in Norway. Yeah.
In Norway, yeah. So all of these are called terrorists, and they're openly called terrorists.
I knew that would be your argument. I just wanted to make that clear because I didn't want somebody accusing Faisal of saying like, "Oh, he's not calling him a terrorist because he's white." I know that's not his argument. I just wanted him to say that so that people wouldn't think that about him.
You're talking about
we
Lalo,
will call
right?
him
You're
a
talking about
terrorist.
Lalo.
If it turns out that he does have an
Lalo is not
ideological motive,
pointing
we
that
will.
on you.
Yeah.
Lalo actually hates when people say that. So he's not saying he's not claiming that. But I just know a lot of people are saying that on the news, like, oh, he's not a terrorist because he's white. I just didn't want anybody accusing you of that, so I wanted you to clarify.
Thank you, Armin. Yeah, so let's wrap it up. I think that was the last question. Yasmin, unfortunately, didn't participate a lot. We love her a lot, but she's not want to talk to us anymore.
No, I had like a whole bucket of vodka, so
that's why.
That's a big glass.
That's
it's a
why.
very big glass.
You got to catch up on 20 years of not doing that shit. You know, it's got to be.
I see. That's actually a good reason. So this ends up the last episode of Secular Jihadists. And I think
for the night.
One announcement for our patrons. We are interviewing Ron Miscavige, who is the...
Is it for sure?
Yes, I mean...
Are we telling people?
As a producer confirmed it to me, so I would take it and say yes.
Okay.
That he is the father of the current leader of the Church of Scientology.
Send us your question, people.
So send us, for those who give us 100 shawarmas and above, you have the right to ask a question that we might ask in the podcast. I'm actually very excited. I met him just 4 or 5 days ago in Wisconsin. A very nice guy. Well, he's kind of like my father's age, but has a very interesting view. He has a book. So if guys get yourself familiar with him, I think he has a show on American, what's called AE, the one that was it American Entertainment, I think. That is about the Church of Scientology. I think it will be really interesting conversation. Talk about like Scientology versus Islam versus ex-Muslims versus Scientologists versus Islamism versus Majid Nawaz.
Should we just focus on Scientology?
Yeah, probably we will. I mean, probably we'll maybe find like a common thing between a cult of Scientology and raising up in a cult within majority Muslim countries. Scientologyism versus Islamism. That would be a really interesting conversation to have.
Okay, so if you want to compare, we could bring that up a little bit.
Yeah, the only difference between a cult and a religion is size. That's it.
But guys, people in the live chat, please send us suggestions. Like not right now, but like because like any questions, like go research the guy, see what do you think would be interesting to ask.
Lalo is saying it's funny how much I mentioned on SJMA. I mean, well,
after my book.
I mean, after our book, I think you're so unfortunately you're not the most mentioned in the podcast, and
I think that that's good actually.
So, thank you so much for listening and while we're watching. Actually, for those of you who are watching us, Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week. Next Thursday, we're gonna do our next recording. We love you.
We love
God
you,
bless.
especially people
God
in the live
bless.
chat. We love you, all of you.
And God bless you, and God bless the United States. Have a great night.
And God bless the right to
Right.
bear arms
All right.
God bless the right to bear arms.
and armed bears.
The secular jihadists have been made possible thanks to the gracious support of the Illuminati and the great state of Israel. That's what we have been told, but we haven't received our checks yet. In the meantime, we greatly appreciate the support of our current donors. Please consider supporting by sharing the podcast with your fellow heathens or by donating at patreon.com/SJME.